Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the channel. Happy Monday, everybody. Hope your day and your week are off to a fantastic start. Got a new day and a new week, which of course means a new MLB Player Prop video to share with you guys. But first, as always, people, please make sure to go ahead and hit the subscribe button, hit that like button, and drop a comment down below. It helps the channel grow, and it really does mean a ton to us. With a new day and a new week comes some new opportunities to go ahead and make some money. I have 6 MLB player props to go ahead and share with you guys in today's MLB slate. Is that a lot of picks? Yeah, it certainly is. But honestly, I just could not get rid of each and every one of them. I just couldn't. I was trying to, all right, which one will I cut? Should I cut this one? Should I cut that one? But ultimately, I like all 6 player props I have. And, you know, we're still in the negative right now in our overall record. But we did show some sign of improvements last week. We were able to go ahead and pick out some winning player props here and there. So we're trending in the right direction. We still have a lot of work to do to get back to breaking even and getting into profit after our really abysmal start. But we are starting to trend in the right direction. So let's keep it going. Let's do even better this week. 6 MLB player props coming your way right now. Jumping right into the outlier screen, guys. Our first pick in today's slate comes from the Giants-Phillies game, 6:45 p.m. first pitch. We're going Jung-Hoo Lee of the San Francisco Giants over 1.5 hits, runs, RBIs, which we are getting for -145 over on DraftKings. It is available on multiple sportsbooks for varying odds. So, guys, make sure to go ahead and shop around for the best sportsbook odds available. Now, Jung-Hoo Lee, I bet a couple times this year, and I've been very profitable betting him. So we're going to rock with him again here in today's slate. Looking at the data here, it's pretty solid overall. Last 10 games, you see he's cashed it in 7 of his last 10 games, including 4 straight games. Had a very successful series against the Yankees. Overall this year, Jung-Hoo Lee has played 14 games. He's cashed the over in 11 out of 14 games. That's a 79% hit rate, averaging 3.29 hits, runs, RBIs per game overall this season. So some pretty good data this year for Jung-Hoo Lee. Now, from a head-to-head perspective, it's not great. Now, all of this data does come from last year's matchups against Philly, all the way back in May of last year. But he did just cash it in 1 of 4 matchups with the Phillies last season. But it's a new year, a new season, and honestly, he's off to a really fantastic start. So we're going to keep riding the hot hand here. He only played 36 games last year. He cashed the over in 50% of those 36 games. But again, as you guys can see, a really strong start to this year. Looking down below at the key matchup stats as well as the insights provided by Outlier. By the way, guys, shout out to today's sponsor, Outlier. All the data, all the information, everything that you see here on your screen, on my screen, is brought to you guys by Outlier. All the data, there's so much more, guys. I'm only showing you guys a little bit of what Outlier provides. There's so much more to explore with Outlier. Check it out for yourself. Link down below in the description. 7-day free trial to go ahead and check it out for yourself. I can't possibly show you guys everything in a single video. I show you guys what I think is important, but there's so much more. There's even heat maps. You down below here. There's so much more. There's betting odds. There's a lot of stuff in this screen here, guys, and there's so much to explore. So go ahead and check it out for yourself. Again, link down below in the description. 7-day free trial. Now, the insights provided by Outlier, like I mentioned here, Jung-Hoo Lee has exceeded this over in 1.5 hits, runs, RBIs in 14 of his last 17 games. This dating back to last season and including all 14 games this year, averaging 3.2 hits, runs, RBIs per game over his last 17 games, which again includes all of his games this year and the final 3 games of last year as well. Now, in terms of the matchup versus Taijuan Walker, 3 plate appearances since 2018. He's got 1 hit off of him. It's a small sample size, not too much to go off of, but at least he's gotten a hit off of him. Jung-Hoo Lee, small sample size, and we're still going off of last year's numbers, unfortunately. We do not have yet on Outlier the updated 2025 data. I'm assuming by next week we should get those updates. But for now, we're still kind of going off of last year's numbers and using that as sort of a reference point, combining that with how he's played so far this season. 262 batting average last year. However, versus right-handed pitchers, you do see his batting average and his WRC plus both increase by a pretty healthy margin against right-handed pitchers. And Taijuan Walker last year, not the best year. 7.10 ERA, 3.17 batting average allowed, 2.6 home runs per 9, 4.13 WOBA. All those numbers do decrease when facing off with left-handed batters, which isn't ideal for us. However, even the decreased lines. I mean, 6.59 ERA. Spoiler alert, that's not very good. 2.94 batting average allowed, not very good. Yes, they're all decreases from his overall numbers. Clearly versus right-handed batters, he was even worse. But versus left-handed batters, he is still pretty bad, at least taking last year's numbers into account. So I think it's a pretty solid player prop. Again, we're riding the hot hand of Jung-Hoo Lee and matching that with the fact that he's got a pretty solid matchup here against Taijuan Walker and the Philadelphia Phillies. That's our first player prop in today's slate. And speaking of Taijuan, I always get the names wrong, Taijuan Walker, he's our second player prop in today's slate, sticking with this Giants-Phillies game. We're taking his over in strikeouts, over 3.5. This is another player that I've taken a couple times this year, and it's cashed me thus far. Again, minus 144 on FanDuel, a little juiced, but not too bad. You can find this again on multiple sports books for varying odds. And like I said, guys, I bet this 2 times this year, and he's cashed it both times. I bet him averaging 4.5 strikeouts per game this season. So some pretty good numbers here for Taijuan. If we go over to the head-to-head data too, each of his last 2 matchups with the San Francisco Giants, he's cashed the over. These, of course, dating back to last year, but both successful games, averaging 5.5 strikeouts per game against the Giants. And if we scroll down below here to the batting numbers here, now San Francisco versus right-handed pitchers, you do see last year their strikeout rate was already pretty high, but this year it's high as well. Again, last 30 data includes the end of last year with all the games so far this year. So far in 2025, the Giants are bottom 5 in Major League Baseball in terms of strikeout percentage, strikeouts per 9. All the data, they are one of the most struck out teams in Major League Baseball this year. So it's a pretty good matchup for a guy who's already cashed this line twice this year. I think it's definitely worth taking a shot at. It's minus 144. Yeah, it's a little high on the juiced odds, but I do think it's a pretty solid matchup here as our second player prop in today's slate. All right, guys, our third player prop in today's slate comes from the Royals-Yankees game, 7:05 p.m. first pitch. We got Paul Goldschmidt of the New York Yankees. Still weird to say that. I was ready to say St. Louis Cardinals. Paul Goldschmidt of the New York Yankees over 1.5 hits, runs, RBIs, which we're getting from minus 120 over on BetMGM. Again, the data is pretty solid on this player prop as well, guys. 7 of his last 10 games, he's cashed the over, averaging 2.2 hits, runs, RBIs per game over his last 10 games. We look at the entire season data for 2025 thus far. He's played 15 games. He's cashed the over in 9 out of 15 games with a 60% hit rate, averaging 2.27 hits, runs, RBIs per game over the course of the entire 15-game season thus far. So like I said, pretty good data there from a head-to-head standpoint as well. Pretty solid. Each of his last 4 matchups against the Kansas City Royals, he's cashed the over. That is, of course, a 100% hit rate, averaging 3 hits, runs, RBIs per game across those last 4 matchups against Kansas City. Now, granted, all 4 of those matchups came last year when Paul Goldschmidt was still in St. Louis, so slightly different circumstances here, but of course he had success against this Royals team. Now, most of the time when I take a player prop, especially going against a pitcher like Seth Lugo, I would try to avoid taking overs or maybe even taking under here, but honestly, Paul Goldschmidt in his career, at least dating back to 2018, has had a lot of success against Seth Lugo. You look at this numbers here. 12 plate appearances against Lugo since 2018. He's batting 600 with a 667 OBP against Seth Lugo. That includes 2 home runs and 2 RBIs with a pretty low strikeout rate of 16.7%. That head-to-head data right there really is the intriguing part of this. Of course, the fact that the data so far this year is 60% hit rate, 70% over his last 10 games. Those obviously help me lead to taking this player prop. However, that little head-to-head matchup there between Goldschmidt and Lugo is very, very intriguing. Now, if you do go look at the splits down below, it actually doesn't look like a great matchup. Paul Goldschmidt last year, 245 batting average versus right-handed pitchers. You saw a decrease to 230. His WRC plus decreases from 99.7 to 88. So that's a little alarming here. And obviously, Seth Lugo, his numbers versus right-handed batters, again, last year. Unfortunately, we're still using last year's data. But based off last year's numbers, he had a pretty solid batting average allowed, pretty solid WOBA. His ERA and home runs per 9 slightly uptick, but still, overall, Lugo was really, really solid across the board last year. Now, looking down below, Paul Goldschmidt against the different pitch arsenals. Now, you see Seth Lugo here. He heavily relies his 3 top pitches, or 4 top pitches, I should say, fastball, slider, sinker, and curveball. They all are 17% or more of his pitch arsenal here. Looking down below, Paul Goldschmidt overall last year had a 26.5% strikeout rate with a 310 WOBA. However, you go ahead and narrow it down to the pitches that Seth Lugo primarily throws. His WOBA is over his average in almost all 4 of these pitches. Now, the strikeout rate is also very high in some of these, which is a little bit concerning. But 348 WOBA versus the fastball, 328 versus the slider. Again, 300 is considered solid. 400 obviously is very elite. Anything under 300 is less than ideal when talking about WOBA. So again, 328, not bad. Now you see there's the slider, the sinker, which 18.6% of his pitches last year were sinkers. 410 WOBA, so really good against the sinker. And even against the curveball, 382 WOBA. The pitches where he more struggled, you saw the changeup, his numbers dropped to 240 WOBA. The cutter, 303, not awful. And then you see the splitter, his worst one, 210. However, you see Seth Lugo, only 2.5% of his pitches were splitters last year. But primarily the pitches that Seth Lugo relies on the most, Paul Goldschmidt was pretty solid. Not elite necessarily, but really solid against all those pitches. I think it's worth taking a shot here. A guy who's had a pretty good history against Seth Lugo. That's our third player prop in today's slate. All right, guys, our fourth player prop in today's slate comes from the Red Sox-Rays game. 7:05 p.m. first pitch. We've got Alex Bregman of the Boston Red Sox over 1.5 hits, runs, RBIs. We're getting this one for minus 115 over on DraftKings. Again, it is available on multiple sports books for varying odds. Now, unlike the previous three player props that I've shown you guys in today's video, this one, the data is not as strong. Just 4 of his last 10 games, he's cashed the over with a really big performance there back on April 6th against St. Louis. That really skews his average up a little bit, but overall, it's not great, despite the fact that he's averaging 2.6 hits, runs, RBIs per game over his last 10. That huge 12 HRR performance against St. Louis definitely skews the numbers a little bit. Looking at the overall data in 2025, 35% hit rate, 6 out of 17 games this year for Boston. He's cashed the over. Again, averaging 2.35 hits, runs, RBIs per game, but he's had 2 really big games there that, again, kind of skew the data. But for the most part, he has not been cashing this line all that consistently. Now, as we take a little bit of a closer look, you come to understand why I like this player prop. Starting with head-to-head, again, not great data, but better than the overall numbers, a 50% hit rate across his last 6 matchups with Tampa Bay. This, of course, dates back to last year, still as a member of the Houston Astros. But 3 of his last 6 against Tampa Bay, he's cashed the over, averaging 1.83 hits, runs, RBIs per game across those last 6 matchups against the Rays. But looking down below the key matchup stats, you come to understand why this player prop, I think there's a pretty good amount of value on it. Alex Bregman versus Shane Baz. Really good numbers. 7 plate appearances since 2018. He's gotten 5 hits in 7 plate appearances, batting .714 with a .714 OBP. He has a home run. He's never struck out. Only 7 plate appearances, not a massive sample size, but it doesn't matter. 5 hits in 7 plate appearances. He's had a lot of success against Shane Baz. Looking down below, again, we're still using last year's numbers, which is still frustrating on my part because I do want the updated numbers. It's coming. Outlier needs a little bit more time to get all the updated stats in their program here. But 260 batting average last year, 274 when facing off with right-handed pitchers, 125.1 WRC plus, which is an increase from 118. So like I said, some pretty good numbers here for Alex Bregman, again, taking last year into consideration when facing off with right-handed pitchers. And Shane Baz, who was solid overall last year, you do see that versus right-handed batters, the numbers do increase, which obviously is favorable for us. Now, his ERA and his home runs per 9 do drop when facing off with right-handed batters. However, his batting average allowed and his WOBA both increase a decent amount when facing off with right-handed batters. Again, not the best match of all time, but based on the head-to-head data here with Bregman versus Shane Baz, it should be a pretty solid matchup. All right, guys, on to our 5th player prop in today's slate. But before we dive into that, please comment 13 down below if you're still watching. We just passed the 13-minute mark in today's video. As always, guys, I truly appreciate those who watch through each and every single video here on the channel. It really does mean a lot to us. So if you are still watching this point, comment 13 down below. And again, thank you very much for your support through watching through all the videos. It really does mean a lot to all of us, not just myself, but also Ev and Trey. So our 5th player prop in today's slate comes from the Cubs-Padres game, 9:40 p.m. first pitch. We're going Kyle Tucker of the Chicago Cubs over 1.5 hits, runs, RBIs. This is a plus money play, plus 105 over on DraftKings. Again, available on other sportsbooks as well for varying odds. For a plus money play, the data is pretty solid. He has a 67% hit rate so far this year, 12 out of 18 games. He's cashed the over, averaging 3.33 hits, runs, RBIs per game so far this year. So like I said, for a plus money play, pretty good data. Even if you go ahead and narrow it down to the last 10, 60% hit rate's not bad. 6 of his last 10, averaging 2.8 hits, runs, RBIs per game. So some pretty solid numbers. He's recorded at least a hit in every game except for their April 9th game against the Rangers. So pretty good numbers there from a head-to-head perspective as well. 3 of his last 5 matchups against the San Diego Padres. He's cashed the over. It's a 60% hit rate, 3 of his last 5, averaging 3 hits, runs, RBIs per game against the Padres. This is the 4th game of the season facing off with San Diego. So far this year, they've played 3 times. He's cashed the over in 2 of 3 games, and the last time they played on April 6th, He had a really solid performance, 2 hits, 2 runs, and 3 RBIs. And what was a 8-7 loss for the Cubbies? Now looking down below at the key matchup stats for Kyle Tucker. By the way, the insights provided by Outlier, Kyle Tucker has exceeded 1.5 hits, runs, RBIs in 10 of his last 13 games on the road, averaging 3.9 hits, runs, RBIs per game over his last 13 road games. So pretty good numbers here, and honestly, pretty solid data against Dylan Cease. 11 plate appearances since 2018. He's batting .400 off of them with a .455 OBP, 4 hits, 1 RBI, pretty low strikeout rate, 18.2%. Basically struck out 2 times in 11 plate appearances, but pretty solid numbers. Dylan Cease, obviously a really solid pitcher. And granted, it's only 11 plate appearances, but the fact that he's batting .400 and has a .455 OBP against Dylan Cease is a pretty solid mark there. Kyle Tucker, using last year's numbers, 289 batting average overall, 180 WRC plus. However, versus right-handed pitchers, you see increases in all of those numbers, or the 2 primary numbers, I should say, batting average and WRC plus. 305 batting average when facing off with right-handed pitchers last year, a nice increase from his 289 mark, and also 201.9 WRC plus, again, an increase from his overall mark of 180. Looking at Dylan Cease, though, that's where it kind of gets dicey. His numbers are not great in this matchup. Now, there are some increases from his overall numbers when he's facing off with left-handed batters, definitely the weaker side of his game, but 212 batting average allowed, although it's an increase from his overall number of 200, is still a pretty solid number. 286 WOBA allowed. His ERA has a slight drop to 341. Again, Dylan Cease, he's one of the better pitchers in Major League Baseball, but we've seen Kyle Tucker have some success against him, and honestly, he had a lot of success versus right-handed pitchers last year. And we look down below to see Kyle Tucker versus certain pitches, and again, looking at what Dylan Cease relied on last year, the slider, 47.2% of his pitches were sliders. Fastball, 43.5% of his pitches were fastball. Everything else after that, not much. But those are obviously the 2, slider and fastball. Those are the 2 pitches that he so heavily relied on last year. Now, overall, Kyle Tucker, 419 WOBA last year, really solid. Versus the slider, his most utilized pitch, 435, an increase from his overall numbers, which is really, really good. Again, over 400 is really, really good. It's elite. 435, pretty solid. Now, his strikeout rate does increase, but it's still 19.6%. Not bad. And look at the numbers versus the fastball here, 481 with just a 9.7% strikeout rate. So really good matchup across the board. I don't really understand why it's a plus money play because everything to me seems like we've got a really solid matchup on our hands here. But hey, you're giving me plus money, I'll definitely take it. Give me Kyle Tucker over 1.5 hits, runs, RBIs. And our 6th and final player prop in today's slate, guys, comes from the Rockies-Dodgers game, 10:10 p.m. first pitch. We're going Mookie Betts of the LA Dodgers over 1.5 hits, runs, RBIs, which is minus 150 right now over on BetMGM, also available on DraftKings and Underdog for varying odds. Now this one, the overall numbers are okay. The recent run he's been on has not been great. He's cashed the over in just 1 of his last 5 games. In the last 10 games, a 40% hit rate, 4 of his last 10, averaging 1.5 hits, runs, RBIs per game over his last 10 games. However, if you do go ahead and stretch the data out the entire season view, a 57% hit rate on the year. Mookie got off to a really solid start there with 4 straight cashes to open the year, and since then, not as impressive. Again, 4 of his last 10 after going 4 for 4 on this over, but he's averaging 2.36 hits, runs, RBIs per game. He's recorded at least 1 hit-run RBI in every game except for April 12th versus the Cubs and April 2nd against Atlanta. Again, not great data, but not terrible either. From a head-to-head perspective, 4 of his last 9 matchups against the Rockies, he's cashed the over, averaging 1.67 hits, runs, RBIs per game. However, narrow it down a little bit to the last 7 games. He's cashed it in 4 of his last 7. Of course, all of these matchups dating back to last season. But the data, although it's not fantastic, it's still Mookie Betts we're talking about here, going up against the Colorado Rockies. Now look at the matchup here. Against Antonio Senzatella, 22 plate appearances since 2018, so a pretty decent sample size here. 450 batting average, 500 OBP, 9 hits, 2 home runs, 3 RBI. So pretty good head-to-head matchup there, and 22 plate appearances is a significant sample size to go off of. For him to be still batting 450 with 22 plate appearances, really good data for Mookie Betts in this matchup. Now again, looking at last year's numbers, 289 batting average overall. You do see a slight dip when facing off with right-handed pitchers, 280, but still 280 is a really good mark. His WRC plus, a minor increase when facing off with right-handed pitchers. Now, Antonio Senzatella did not pitch a ton last year, only faced 54 batters last year, but he really struggled. There's not really much to go off of here. Now, versus right-handed batters, again, very small sample size, just 23 batters faced, but last year, 514 WOBA, 1157 ERA, 400 batting average allowed. We can't go off of too much of that because it's such a small sample size. A couple batters go off, and that's all it takes. He didn't play enough last year for us to really go ahead and make any references on this. So I'm just going to go ahead and really focus on this right here, the 22 plate appearances since 2018. That's more what I'm looking for here because, again, these numbers here, just not a big enough sample size, but I do still think based off of this right here, we got a pretty good solid player prop on our hands. So that is our 6th and final player prop in today's slate. Guys, thank you very much, as always, for watching. One more time, please make sure to go ahead and hit the subscribe button, hit that like button, and drop a comment down below. We'll, of course, be back tomorrow with another MLB player prop video. But until then, guys, I hope you're all winners. Enjoy your Monday. Let's have a great week, a great Holy Week if you are practicing. Yeah, I don't want, obviously everyone's welcome. I try to be inclusive to everybody. But, of course, if you are a Christian and this is Holy Week, go ahead and enjoy Holy Week. Let's have a great week. Let's win some money, make some profit. And, yeah, until tomorrow, guys, hope you're all winners. Let's go ahead and make some money.